So, we start with chapter 11, God's plan for the southern kingdom.
Yeah.
So we had this, all the dynasties last week, and we had the kingdoms, and we had the judges. Now we come the plan with the southern kingdom. So now we look at the southern kingdom. Remember, it was Israel and Judah, with Jerusalem in the middle. Remember? Okay. Now we're going on. We look here, we first read 2 Kings 17, verse 18 to 19. The Lord was very angry with Israel and removed them out of his sight. There was none left but the tribe of Judah only. Also Judah kept not the commandments of the Lord their God, but walked in the statutes of Israel which they made. Okay, so here we see already something is going to happen with Israel. So it's the southern and the northern kingdom. Something is going to happen with Israel because he said he removed Israel out of his sight.
Yeah.
So something is going to happen there. We look at the introduction. The northern kingdom experienced 8 revolutionary changes of dynasty or ruler during 2 centuries, but Judah existed for nearly 3.5 centuries with the same dynasty. So, as we can see, the northern kingdom, that was there was 8 different evolution changes in their dynasties, as we had it in the last session. So they went right. There was you saw that there's different dynasties, different ones we spoke about. That was Israel's one, but Judah only had one. He had one dynasty, and it existed for 3.5 centuries with the same dynasty. That didn't change zigzag, like Israel did. So why? Let's see, why did it happen? Jehovah promised David that a kingdom would be established with his descendants in Judah, and Judah is the recipient of this promise. So the line of Judah is going to go, that kingdom, that promise that they made with Judah, with David, was the kingdom of Judah, the Judahish tribe.
Yeah.
Okay, that is what was said. Let's see. The southern kingdom, this is Judah, survived 135 years after the defeat of Israel. So you see, it's 2 different. It's not one. It's 2 different. Maybe you asked me the questions. So the question previously is 2 different tribes. Yeah. After Judah people were taken into captivity, they were not assimilated into other cultures and did not lose their culture and religious distinctives. So they didn't like Israel, as you see right from the beginning. We saw how they mixed with the other cultures and the so-called pagan gods and all that stuff. You could see they mixed tightly, but Judah didn't do it. They kept pure. They kept absolutely pure. Prophets announced the imminent restoration of God's chosen remnant of Judah, and God's plan for his covenant people was to be carried out by the righteous remnant who would be restored. So, from what line did Jesus come? Just a general question if you read this.
The line from tribe of Judah.
The tribe of Judah, because that's a pure line and it's coming from David.
Yes.
So we automatically see that actually in today they want to say Israel is everything, but here we see God spoke about Judah and Israel. So, and today they don't speak about the 2 tribes. But if you think about it, there's 2 different, there's a lot of tribes, there's 12, but the groups, there's 2 different groups that existed. And you will see now Israel totally went in mekaar, if I can say it like that in Afrikaans. But they will come together again. In 1948 they started again. And that's Judah also coming in. Because they had to be quite pure for the existing line for Christ. Okay? Assyrian denomination of Judah. The long reign of Uzziah brought prosperity to Judah, and he was deeply mourned by most Israelites. Now we see again we've got Judah, but there was Israelites also there. Okay? So he was really mourned by them. Uzziah had been a close personal friend of the king. There's no Isaiah. And he suffered anguish when he heard of Isaiah's death. That we see in Isaiah 6. We can read up about that. So, Isaiah and Isaiah, different spelling. The one is Uzziah, the one is Uzziah, the one is with a U, and the one is with an I. Just two different people, the king and then the prophet. We look at the reign of Jotham in 742 to 735 before Christ. Now, let me quickly see if I can get that other one. There. We dealt with this one quite a lot the other day. And we delete that. Come up. Delete. That we get it. Now we're coming back to this. 742. Must be a bit higher up today. 742. It was somewhere here. 742. That was Judah this side, and it was Israel this side. So 742 Judah. Up they don't have him in here. It must be 742 somewhere here.
737.
Yeah, something there. Okay. Uzziah's son Uzziah, I would say Uzziah's son Jotham began to reign as Corgan about 750 before Christ. 750, that's in between those two. Before Christ. When Uzziah, leprosy prevented his appearing in public. So now we know a case of leprosy was that it was thrown out of normally the congregation, out of the whole city. They were not supposed to be in it, but he was there because he was a king. Jotham's death left Ahaz, who was 20 years old, to bear the burden of the northern coalition. Now let's see. Ahaz, there he is. There's Jotham, we spoke about. There's Jotham, they got another time frame for that. So, as I said, I don't know if the book is right, and if this is right, I would rather go on the books. Is this one? There's Jotham, that's the wrong time frame. Ahaz is the next one, and he was only 20 years old. And he burned incense in the valley of the son of Hannom, and burned his sons as an offering. Can you believe it? So the incense, it was done by the pagan gods again. There was again all the pagan gods, yeah. And he burned his sons of offering. What was that god's name? That pagan god.
Which one?
His sons that he burned to. Who did he offer that? What was that god's name? We spoke about it already.
Baal.
Moloch.
Oh.
Baal, Moloch. According to the abominable practices of the nations, who the Lord drove out before the people of Israel, that we read in 2 Chronicles 28, verse 3. Okay. Oh no, maybe I'm again here on the wrong page. Okay, there we go. Let's come to the right page. Okay. Right. While Ahaz, while Ahaz was summoned before the Assyrian king, he saw an altar and had the priest Ariah duplicated that altar in that king place in Assyria. That thing he duplicated and he put it in Jerusalem. So that pagan altar, he took it and put it in Jerusalem. This altar replaces the bronze altar which was in the temple, which had been used previously in the temple. That altar he replaced the real bronze temple of Yahweh. He put it there. This is believed to be a pagan altar. This temple altar was placed in the north side of the new altar. So now, the temple altar was now secondary to the new altar. was put there one side in the north place. Not the major one anymore. The new altar was there. And was reserved for the king's personal use in offering morning sacrifices. That we read in 2 Kings 16, verse 10 and 15. Just think, it is really thinking of you pushing God that way, and you push in this pagan thing here in front of God. That's exactly what happened there. Okay? The sea of bronze was removed from the supporting bronze oxen and was placed in the stone base. So again, this thing that they had for God, with the sea of oxen that was part of the temple, they used some of those supporting bronze and they put it in a stone base for the other one. The bronze of the oxen was used for paying tribute to Assyria. Again, Assyria, is again the same thing. Now let's get that picture. That is what the bronze temple oxen look like. And they use some of these bottom ones, the bronze to put into this new temple. Again, to the pagan god. I mean, just think of ourselves. We are just humans. If I give you something and I tell you I made it, and you go and you break it up and you give it to somebody else, I'm not going to feel very, very nice about it. You know, if I gave it and there was a reason for it, and now if I as a human will feel bad, just think how must God feel. You know, He's a God. So, Judah had been made a vassal for Assyria, and King Ahaz was required to sacrifice to the gods of Damascus. That we read in 2 Chronicles 28, verse 22. Ahaz closed the doors of the temple and built altars to the Syrian gods in every section of Jerusalem and in the other Judean cities. He went so far that they even went, just not in Jerusalem, that was between the two, he went to the Judean cities there also, and he made there the same things. He offered his offering of his son as a sacrifice to God Molech. Remember I said Molech? And in his erection of altars to Ashur and Syrian gods, he became known as one of Judah's worst kings. So that you must now remember. Ahaz was one of God's, Israel's worst kings, of the Judah's worst kings. Not Israel, but Judah's worst kings. The territory gained by Uzziah was lost by Ahazim, thus removing a source of revenge for Judah. The tribute demanded by Assyria had to be raised by confiscating the treasures from the temple and depleting the king's treasury. There, the temple, all this stuff, all this beautiful stuff that he had in the temple. Yeah. The monarch, the showbread stands, everything is gone. This brought poverty, and the poor were depossessed. Sorry. The poor were depossessed by landholders and were cheated by dishonest business transactions. Even the judges were corrupt. Doesn't that sound familiar? Every time I read it, I think to myself, doesn't it sound familiar? Doesn't it sound again that it's repeating? It's repeating the old things coming back. It's repeating itself again. Exactly what happened here. The evil is repeating itself. Isaiah 1. The wealthy continue to bring numerous offerings to the temple and to go through sacrificial rituals, but they did not please Yahweh because their lives was corrupt. So as we also know, in today's life, there's people going to churches and they praise God and do all nice things and do things for God, but their lives, if you go to their home and you see what they're doing and the way they live, is everything except what God wants. I know I'm doing counseling, and then I hear about people that is so fantastic in church. Yeah, this man is one of the people in the church. But as soon as I get home, He's a drunkard and he's ugly with his wife and his kids, and you get it. And remember, the woman can also, the wife can also, the woman, also that part can be the same. And that is false. They are false. And what do they say? They are corrupt in their lives. So, God did not accept it. God was not pleased. The reign of Hezekiah, 1715 to 687.
Mm.
1750 to 6. Okay, see, there's also the wrong date.
The date, yeah.
So, but there's Hezekiah. Hezekiah succeeded his father Azaz when he was 25 years old, and he reversed the policies of his father. 2 Kings 18 verse 13 and 19 verse 9. The ministry of the prophet Isaiah continued in the reign of Hezekiah. Isaiah 1 verse 1. He warned Judah of a fate similar to that of Israel if the people did not return to the worship of Yahweh. So, we know again, they are warned. And it was again prophets. Okay?
Yeah.
So they were warned. You know, just looking at this now, the name Yahweh and Jehovah is exactly the same name. They don't know actually it was not the clinkers wasn't in the word, so some just put the O and some put the A. So Jehovah is nothing to do with Jehovah Witnesses. Jehovah and Yahweh, and okay, what's the other one? Yahoo is also one that pronounces. So it's all the same name. It's just different pronunciation. You get Jesus and Jasu is the same. Jasua is another one that pronounced for Jesus. So it's just a different pronunciations. It's not another God or something. And it's not Jehovah Witnesses. Jehovah is actually just the name for Yahweh. It's different pronunciations for the same name. Okay. Isaiah and Mecca influenced Hezekiah, and they removed the high places. So there they go now again. Okay, there was something wrong again, and they went in and Isaiah said, okay, no, we must go back to God. That's now in Judah, and they removed the high places. You know the high places with all the poles for pagan gods and stuff. They destroyed sacred pillars, cut down the secret poles of Asa, 2 Kings 18 verse 4, opened doors of the temples, repaired them, re-established the priestly rituals, cleansed and sacrificed the temple cleansed and sanctified the temple, 2 Chronicles 29 to 31. The people of the northern kingdom were invited, Israelites, to participate in the celebration of the Passover. Hezekiah's religious reforms reached into Ephraim and Manasseh, and they were cleansed of idolatry also. So there he made a good thing again. Judah went right, the wrong that started, they went back. They didn't totally went wrong, they went back. Very fast. By his conquest in Canaan, he prepared the way to the campaign into Egypt. Now he's going to Egypt again. Egypt had continued to be weak under feeble rivals. After 24th dynasty, about 725 to 710 before Christ. Now we did the dynasties already.
Yeah.
So I can't say 725 here because I don't know. This is not right, okay? The Ethiopian king Bianchi had overrun Upper Egypt and eventually founded the 25th dynasty. There they go, Upper Egypt. Okay, we are now in Egypt. We are now in Egypt. We're not in Judah anymore. We are in Egypt. Okay? And this the 24th dynasty was also in Egypt. The 25th one also in Egypt. The king of Tyre became leader of a coalition in Syria and Canaan. Hezekiah's participation was criticized by Isaiah, who believed that dependence and neighboring kingdoms was an indication of rebellion against a lack of faith in, which one do you want me to pronounce? Yahweh. Isaiah 30 and 31. Hezekiah had a tunnel dug through solid rock to channel water from a spring to the new pool of Siloam within the city walls. Now, we're going back there, and I found that also, the pool of Siloam. There's where what I found. It was in there, came in there, and there you can see the other side. That was the pool. I found it. And that's when you look at from that, went down the stairs, you look at from on top. They went down the stairs, and that is the pool. I found it. Okay. So, this is, didn't I write something? No, I didn't write something here. No. So yeah, that's actually very nice. Sennacherib turned on Judah and conquered 46 of Judah's fortified cities. Wow, inspired. Hezekiah offering to surrender and promised to pay whatever tribute was imposed upon him, and therefore problems came. Hezekiah had to strip the temple and the place of gold and silver to pay the 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold that we read about 2 Kings 18 verse 14. There we go again. There they need Hezekiah had to take this temple ornaments, what do you call it, temple treasures, and to give to Sennacherib to keep it peace, and there they stripped the temple again. The second time that Hezekiah was demanded to surrender, he refused, and Sennacherib's army was crippled by a plague sent by God, because that was very not willingly given. He didn't have a choice. 2 Kings 19 verse 35, and Jerusalem was spared. So Jerusalem, that's where the temple stands. So they gave some of the stuff in the temple, the gold and the silver in the temple, but God saved it. He wasn't punished because he didn't have a choice. Okay? He was not willingly given. Okay, now let's go. Oh, that's just coming back to this one. The miraculous deliverance developed the belief that Jerusalem's inviolability was based on God's promises to David rather than on Israel's covenant responsibility. Okay? God promised to David rather than Israel's covenant responsibility. So, here we find that if God gives us a promise, doesn't matter what the human do, He will keep His promise. So what can we hold on to? Jesus told us if we have faith in Him and hold on to Him, we will be saved in His name through faith. So what can we know? We are saved. He will keep His promise. Does it make you happy? It makes you happy, eh? He will keep His promise. You know, we can slip here, but we come back to God. He will keep His promise. We're only human. If I can say, but we live closer to God. And every time we can go closer to God, we get more, if we can say it in that way, holy. Because you want to be like God. As an example, God is in you. Jesus is in the Holy Spirit in you. And that's why you live more holy. Every time the closer you get to God. Okay. So so He will keep His promise. Isn't that fantastic? He did it right through the Old and the New Testament. The rule of Manasseh, 687 to 642 before Christ. Now we come by the rule of Manasseh. Hezekiah and Manasseh, the next one. 681 to 642, 669, so it's in between that times. Hezekiah's son Manasseh was 20 years old. still a child, and he declared himself loyal to Assyria soon after ascending to the throne. Can you believe? Sennacherib, youngest son, Esarhaddon, come to the throne in 681 to 669 before Christ and established his power over the conquered nation. He died in his second campaign into Egypt revolt, but his son and successor Ashurbanipal, 669 to 627 before Christ, crushed the rebellion. Here we go into Egypt again. The Assyrian army remained in the west during the early part of Manasseh's reign, but he had little choice but to remain loyal as a vassal of Assyria. It doesn't matter what he's doing, Manasseh had to keep quiet. The Assyrians vassal whatever they want. Okay? Assyria, because they are bigger and they control more of the parts of the Egyptian from the Egyptian side. Okay? Manasseh was suspected to disloyalty but was allowed to return to Jerusalem. 2 Chronicles 33, verse 11. Manasseh reserved the religious policies of his father and restored the high places. There he's going back. Okay. So he's going back. Because of he was oppressed by the other king, by Sennacherib, and his son was there, and Manasseh was just said, okay, he was loyal towards them, and yeah, he was dishonest towards the religious side of Yahweh. He was disloyal to them, but he was loyal to the Egyptian king. Okay. Manasseh reversed the religious policies of his father and restored the high places. Here we go. Altars for Baal, pole images of Asherah, and altars in Jerusalem for all the hosts of heaven. 2 Kings 21 verse 3 to 5. How many times was it broken off and built again? And then break it again, and then build it again. How many times we must have started putting ones, see how many ones we had at the end. You know, to see how many times they break it off and then they rebuild it again. You know? So yeah. So Manasseh was accused of worship the host of heaven, sacrificing his son as a burnt offering. I can't see how any person can do something like that. Just to think about that scream, how that child must scream. I can't see how any person can do that. And practicing Sabbath and, what was that? That I typed. This is Sabbath, most probably Sabbath at Castalian. At Egypt. Place the graven images of Asherah in the temple. Do you have it there? It's practicing something I typed here, things that's not right. You have it there.
And practicing soothsaying and I'm not sure how to pronounce Augury. Augury. Yes.
Oh, God. What's it 2 names again?
Soothsaying.
Soothsaying and Archat. Practicing soothsaying and practicing soothsaying and Archat.
Yeah.
Placed a graven image of an Asherah in the temple, and her images implies that sacred prostitution was practiced in the temple. In the temple!
Sure.
It is very bad.
Yeah.
It is very bad, really. Manasseh led the people to sin. Doom was pronounced upon Jerusalem in 2 Kings 21 verse 12 to 15. Note, Molech was a pagan god children were sacrificed to. Now, Chemosh in 2 Kings 3 verse 29 was related to the Ammonite god Molech in 1 Kings 11 verse 2. So, this is the same god, it's just 2 different names for the same god. Okay? Shemesh. Moloch, meaning king, was a title of the pagan god. Different names in various countries included for the same thing. For Moloch was Muluk of Mari, Malcolm of Ammon, Adramelech, that was the lordship of kings, and Anamelech, the combination of Moloch and Mesopotamian sky god Anu, as Assyria, of Assyria. That was all the same god as Moloch, but they burned their children to it. Yeah. So just see the different places and how many. Mari, Amnon, okay, then your lordship of kings, and the other one in Assyria. So there's quite a lot of places. It's not one place. There was quite a lot of places that this God was there, that Balak was there, they're offering children. I will never offer my children to him. Thank you. The reference to Manasseh building altars for all the hosts of heaven is a reference to Moloch of Molech, who was conceived of primary as an astral deity. The children offered as burnt sacrifice to this god in the valley of Hinnom. The area was considered and became a garbage dump at the end. Just think how it must have stink there. The Greek translation for valley of Hinnom is Gehenna. Do you know what Gehenna means?
Gehenna is like hell.
Like hell. That's exactly. The word that was used to designate hell was Gehenna.
Okay.
So just, the fire, Moloch burning the fire, it's just hell. It's what hell's going to be like. Just that you're not going to burn totally dead, burn, you're going to scream all the time. Those children die. So they don't feel at the moment the flames. But they're going to feel one day, the hell, you're going to feel it. Will be permanently. Manasseh followed his grandfather Ahaz in child sacrificing in 2 Kings 16 verse 3. Manasseh's deed caused him to be branded as the worst king of the David dynasty. So there we've got Manasseh. Ahaz was the one.
Yeah.
And now we've got Manasseh. Okay? So that was the David dynasty one and the Israelite one. Okay. Ashurbanipal of Assyria, 669 to 625 before Christ. Die name. Psammetichos 1, 663 to 609 before Christ. That is not up here. Because he was from Egypt. Began to expand his power and was strong enough by 655 before Christ to refuse to pay tribute. The northern frontier of Assyria was being threatened by waves of barbarian Cimmerians, who came from beyond the Caucasian region and Scythians. Why do they use such difficult names? The Medes continued to threaten the northeastern frontier, and Edomites exerted pressure on the east. Ashurbanipal overcome the Babylonian revolt in 648 before Christ and subdued Elam before 640 before Christ. Ashurbanipal was able to re-establish peace in the Assyrian Empire before the end of his reign, and to create a great library which was uncovered in the 19th century. Did I get the... Can't remember now. Yes, I got the library because it was a library also earlier. If earlier we discussed it, that's what the library looked like. Yeah. It considered the earliest known library in history. Archaeology from the British Museum discovered over 30,000 cuneiform tablets and fragments in Nineveh, the capital of Assyria. These included historical inscriptions, letters, administrative and large texts, as well as diverse texts on divination, magic, medicine, literature and language. Since their excavation in the 1850s already. So this is an old one already. Ashurbanipal, great library in the oldest surviving royal library in the world. As I said, the library consists of the collection of clay tablets made, covered in fine writing and pressed together in both sides. Up to 30,000 tablets and fragments containing texts of all kinds of the 7th century before Christ, including texts in various languages who had collected, found under the rubble of the royal palace in Nineveh. One of the most famous works of the library is the Epic of Gilgamesh. We had that also, Mos, in previous lessons. Considered to be the oldest narrative work of mankind. Now this is all in the museum now. That is all in the museum. That was what I found. It was all is now in the museum. Overshadowed by the powerful empire of Egypt, Greece and Rome, they came years later to dominate the world. Assyria has always remained in the background of history, although much has been written about the leader who established this civilization. Few known Ashurbanipal, the ruthless king of the Assyrians. Between 669 before Christ and 631 before Christ, the monarch oversaw the massive expansion of Assyria from its roots in northern Iraq, stretching through ancient Babylon and extended beyond Lower Egypt with the Nile River empty. So it's totally at the beginning. There's more of the library. Make it more, you can see it's more true, eh? As if it's live. And that is the last one. Right. The reign of Ammon, yeah. Now we go back to this one. There. Okay. The reign of Ammon, 642 to 640. Oh, wait, this one is right. 642 to 640. Yeah, that one is right. Manasseh's son succeeded his father Manasseh at the age of 22. He continued the religious policies and was assassinated after 2 years by court servants. Again, previously we also know that the court servants kill the people, eh? The murders was put into death by the people of the land. But the idolatrous practices have been supported by the population. So there was, okay, now the pagan gods can go on. Now, Ammon's 8-year-old son Joshua in 640 before Christ, Joshua 640 to 609, that is right, was made king by the people of the land. 2 Kings 21 verse 24. Now let's look at the reign of Joshua. Joshua beginning to seek after the God of David, his father, in his 8th year, and his purging of Judah and Jerusalem for the high places and the graves and the groves and the carved images, and the molten images during the 12th year of his reign. May have been possible because of the weakening of the Assyrian Empire in 2 Chronicles 34 verse 3 to 4. So there he's trying to get rid of the stuff of the pagan gods. Judah and Jerusalem from the high places. So yeah. With the death of Ashurbanipal about 624 before Christ, the end of the Assyrian Empire was near at hand. Neither of his sons who succeeded him was capable of establishing enough power to keep the conquered tribes for the rebellion. The Scythians moved over Western Asia without restraint, and Chaldean prince Nabopolassar, 626 to 605 before Christ, remember that's Egypt, we don't have it here, defeated the Assyrian outside Babylon and gained independence for his country. So we had quite a lot of things happening from the Egyptians and Judah and Israel. Yeah. You can see a lot of things, especially between Egypt also and Judah, and the three of them was constantly mixing up. Okay? The Assyrian capital fell in 914 before Christ, am I right? Assyrian kingdom. Because I've got the digit hereby. No, in 614. The Assyrian capital fell in 614. Am I right there? And then Nineveh fell at 612 before Christ.
Yeah, 614.
614, yeah.
Yeah.
The Assyrian capital fell at 614 before Christ, and Nineveh fell at 612 before Christ.
Yes.
Yeah. The Assyrian Empire disappeared and was replaced by Babylonian Empire. There you go to Babylonian. There Babylonian is coming online. So, he's coming online now. So the Assyrian Empire is now gone, and Babylonian Empire was said, okay, is now bedtime. The Ashurbanipal death, Joshua gained a degree of independence and began religious reforms. He disposed of the gods of the Assyrian overlords and began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of adultery in what's it, that's also a number, right? 240 before, 204 before Christ. Is that right? No, there's 6.
6 to 8.
Oh, why do I have this number? Supposed to have God of the Assyrian overlord and began to purge Judah in the Jerusalem of adultery 6 to 8.
Yeah, before Christ.
628. Okay. So Jerusalem of adultery in 628 before Christ. I have 24 days, so it can't be. His efforts extended to Manasseh, Ephraim, and Naphtali. There we get the other names also in now. One of Joshua's most important activities was to repair the temple of the 18th year, in his 18th year. That was 622 before Christ. There. Now it was Joshua, right? So he prepared the temple again. Here we go again. Don't know for how long it's going to be prepared, but here we go again. After Joshua hearing the words of the book of the law, that was very nice, he rent his clothes in 2 Kings 22 verse 11 and determined to enforce obedience to it, that he got the law in the book. He treated adultery as a capital crime in 2 Kings 23 verse 20 and Deuteronomy 12. So there it was adultery against God was a crime. Okay? So the pagan stuff must be out if you serve God. He destroyed shrines located outside Jerusalem in Deuteronomy 12. Joshua reforms did much towards establishing Jerusalem as the holy city of the righteous remnant and prepared the way for Jerusalem to be the center of Judaism. His determination to follow the book of the law set the trend for the later work of Ezra, who has been called the father of Judaism. So Ezra was very important here. Joshua sought to be re-established the importance of the Sinai covenant by enforcing the ceremonial and moral laws. What was the Sinai covenant?
And the 10 Commandments.
That was written on the tablets.
And
The tablets. His reforms, along with the work of the prophets, established a bias for emphasis on monotheism after the exile. What's the meaning of monotheism?
I have no idea.
You don't know. Monotheism is there's only one God.
Oh, okay.
There's only one God.
Okay.
And we believe our God is a monotheism, is one God.
Okay.
He's a monotheistic God, okay? There's only one God. He's not three. He's not the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. He's one God
Yeah.
that can give him in different forms.
Mm.
But he's one God. It's a monotheistic God. Okay? That is a God. That's what monotheistic means. They also encourage a trend towards external adherence to the law through participation in rituals and develop a resulting sense of security without actually changing the spiritual lives of the people. Now, what rituals are they talking about here? If you think about the Old Testament in the laws, just mention one. For example.
I think we can talk about the Passover,
That's the most important one. The offering of the lamb that they do once a year. Yes. Yes. That's one of the most important ones. That was a ritual they had to do. Okay, so that is a very important one that we have in the New Testament also, and that's our Holy God. That's Jesus. And yeah. But what went wrong this developed now further and went into the New Testament. And Jesus said to the Pharisees, what did he say to the Pharisees about the rituals?
I think he said you are concentrating much on this.
Rituals more than on your
Yeah.
belief. Yeah. With other words, the rituals was very important. So what we see now today is not the ritual that's important, that saves you, but your faith.
Yeah.
And then the ritual comes. So you have to have your faith, and then you can get baptized, the ritual. Because that is just a sign of Jesus' crucifixion. So the ritual is not as important as your faith in Christ. External compliance with the Sinai covenant came to be interpreted as a guarantee that the promise of David concerning a permanent dynasty and state would not be broken. So that covenant will still, well, the whole thing is, that is still not done. The Sinai covenant interpreted a guarantee that the promise to David concerning a permanent dynasty and state would not be broken. When will that permanent dynasty and state come? When is that fulfilled? Because it's not fulfilled yet.
I think when the last, what you call it, is it on the judgment day or after?
After, that is when Jesus puts his foot down on earth to come and fetch us. And come and rule on earth when he's coming back. He's put his foot on the mountain and said, I'm here now. That is when that last dynasty will be there. And that state would not be broken. Joshua was killed in Megiddo during his attempt to stop the Egyptian forces. His body was returned to Jerusalem in his own chariot, and his son Jehoahaz was made king in 609 before Christ. They become by that king. The next one here on board. Right. Yahweh promised to make Abram's descendants a great nation fulfilled in the empire which David established. Before we discussed it or go into this, with the New Testament and everything that we know, who is Abram's descendants in today's life?
In today's life,
we are part of them here. Everyone that believes in God is part, because we are drafted into the tree.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are all descendants of Abraham's promise that God came from. We are all part of his descendants. It's actually nice to know that. The promise was to Abram. Was related to the one of God. Of David. Sorry, let's try it again. This promise was to Abram. Was related to the one of David, in which David's house would rule over the eternal kingdom. David's house, eternal kingdom, that will be God, because he's line of David. He's coming out of the line of David. God's promise to Abram had developed into the Sinai covenant, and the reason to relate the promise to David to the covenant. The Sinai covenant required the people to worship only Yahweh and to be guided by justice in their treatment of one another. So that means what's going on here, we argue with each other, and the one neighbor can't even speak to the other neighbor, then that is not right. Okay? After then we must also say, even in the churches, there's that tip, 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 tip.
Yeah.
That's not right, because we are all supposed to be people of God, and that's mustn't be big. After the Davidic Empire was established, more emphasis came into place with the promise focus on David, because the people expected the nation to continue even though idolatry and injustice prevailed throughout the land. So the promise was focused of the promise that was made to David. It doesn't matter what they do, they just go on. They just hold on to that promise. But they forget they must also listen to God. There was certain commandments given. But they must obey. He said, if you do this, I will do this. Okay? So, Babylonian supremacy, the reign of Joahaz, there's the next one, is 600 before Christ. Joahaz was the youngest son of Josiah's 4 sons. He was made king instead of the older brother by the people of the land. So he was chosen by the people of the land. That was not a normal thing, it was normally the eldest one. They get king, become king, but yeah, the people of the land chose something else. He was summoned to Neku in the capital of Kuili, Syria, and taken into prison. And thereafter they took him to Egypt where he died. That was with all, there was a lot of wars and stuff and things went on. It's not necessarily like you can read everything up in the book. This is just the main focus, what happened there. Tribute was imposed upon Judah in Eliakim. This is the second son of Joshua, whose name was changed to Jehoiakim, who was made king by Neku. Neku killed Joahaz, and now Jehoiakim was made king by him. Jehoiakim lasted only 3 months. So, yeah, what the hell put you a king and you can't reign? Then I would rather stay by not a king. Then I will stay here where I am. Now we look at the reigns of Joachim and Joachim. Joachim and Joachim, those two, at the same time. Or more or less almost the same time. Joachim, 600 to 598, served as a vassal for Neku and was forced to raise a heavy tribute by placing a head tax on all free citizens. Yeah, they do it again. In spite of the poverty in the land, the responsible Judean king squandered funds on the construction of a new and more elaborate palace. Well, I know that one of our presidents have also lived on his staying place, his palace, instead of the people. I know what's going on. His use of forced labor was unpopular. Jeremiah 22 verse 13 to 19, we don't have forced labor in South Africa. I don't know in other countries, I don't think so, but in South Africa that is not allowed. Joachim did not continue the reforms of his father Joshua, but allowed pagan practice to return again. There they're back. There they're back. Guerrilla bands from territories conquered by Babylon, such as Arameans, Moabites, and Ammonites, harassed Judah. There we go, back to Judah. In late 598 before Christ, Nebuchadnezzar was in a position to move westwards. There Nebuchadnezzar is coming on, also on board now. Joachim, Jeremiah 22 verse 18, was succeeded by his 18-year-old son Joachim. Here we the last 2 years. With 3 months early in 597 before Christ, the Babylonian army surrounded Jerusalem and reported to Babylonia. So, they, at that stage of 597 before Christ, they took the king, the queen mother, the high officials, and leading citizens. So it was all the people that was in control. They took them and reported to Babylonia. Okay. Nebuchadnezzar confiscated the temple and placed palace treasures. There we go again. There the temple is coming to. This victory in 597 before Christ led to the first of the 3 deportations. So that was the first one of the 3 that they had. Okay? The reign of Zedekiah and 597 to 587. Here we come at the bottom of the screen now.
Yeah.
In Judah, Judaism, Joachim's uncle Mattaniah, Zedekiah. That Mattaniah was the name we use as Zedekiah, it's the same person. The third son of Joshua to reign was made ruler by the Babylonians. No, it's not anymore the Egyptians, it's now the Babylonians. He faced the impossible task trying to lead a nation in which the people's loyalty were divided between Egypt and Babylonia. So, yeah, now we've got the 4th place in. There was Israel, there was Judah, There was Egypt, and now we've got Babylonia also in the picture.
Yeah.
Okay? The revolt of Babylonia in 595 before Christ prepared the way for Zedekiah rebellion the next year. Envoy from Edom, Moab, Ammon, Tyre and Sidon encouraged Zedekiah to join a coalition against Babylonia in Jeremiah 27 verse 3. Zedekiah has taken an oath of allegiance to Babylonia, and Ezekiel condemned him for breaking it. Ezekiel 17 verse 30. There again, Zedekiah went wrong, and Ezekiel warned him, one of the prophets. Warned him. So we see the importance of the prophets. Every time they warned him,
Yeah.
this is going to come. If you're not listening, this is going to happen. And they didn't listen, and it happened. If they listened, it didn't happen. Jeremiah declared by word and by the prophetic symbolism of wearing a wooden yoke representing Babylonian mystery, that the people would be punished because of their sins according to Yahweh's will. He warned the rebellion against Babylonia would be useless and would only bring death by sword, famine, and pestilence. He warned them. Rival prophet Hananiah contradicted Jeremiah's prophecy, broken the wooden yoke on Jeremiah's shoulders, and promised the return of the captives and the temple's vessels within 2 years. So here come the vessels again. Then Jeremiah used an iron yoke and denounced Hananiah as a false prophet. Jeremiah 28. In 593 before Christ, Zedekiah went to Babylonia. After 5 years, in 593 before Christ, Zedekiah went to Babylonia. After 5 years, Zedekiah rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar, when the new Pharaoh Hophra, is also a priest, came to the throne and promised support to Judah. Nebuchadnezzar laid siege to Jerusalem in 588 before Christ. The city resisted 18 months and fell again. Hope was defeated, and famine and bitter suffering came during the Babylonian attack. Zedekiah attempted to escape but was captured at Jericho and taken to Rablah. Blinded after seeing his son killed and taken in captivity to Babylon, Jeremiah had advocated surrender during a siege and not escape death by his own countrymen. So they wanted to kill him, right? The Babylonian general was ordered to confiscate anything of value and destroy the city. All the inhabitants were to be deported except the lower class, which was to be left to care for the land. So the working class, that they can rule. But all the leaders were out. Gedaliah was made governor of those who remained. The history of Judah as a political state came to an end. So now we know Israel came to an end and Judah came to an end. So what happened to them? Now we're going to, in the next chapter, chapter 12, I'm not going to, there's not enough time. It's only half an hour left and I'm not going to start with that. And in the next chapter we're going to look at what happened in Babylon, the exiles, just taking everything together.